So we read a lot of books here and we love to tell you all about our favorite ones.
But of course, there is a whole another world of books that we don't like as much. And yes, books that for whatever reason, we did not finish.
So a lot of you out there are curious about those books. You've asked us to make a video about our DNF pile. So today we are taking a rare but fun look at the books we did not finish.
All right, so we are going to say right up front that we are pretty ruthless about not finishing books that we don't like.
There's that natural tendency to want to finish things that you start, including books, but that is definitely not our book philosophy here. Life is too short. There are just too many other good books out there to keep reading one that you don't even like.
So if you struggle with this issue, we are giving you permission right now to stop reading that book.
You put that book down.
Put it down, walk away. Your reading time is way too valuable.
Okay, so there are a multitude of reasons why we might DNF a book. So today we're going to walk you through several of those and show you some of the books.
For example, one of the reasons is that there's actually nothing wrong with the book. It's perfectly fine, but it just wasn't the right time and place for us to read it and appreciate it.
Some of these books we give away. Some of them we feel like we might come back to them, so we hold on to them.
So one of my books for this category was from, I think, a couple of years ago, The Rise of the Raiden. I was reading it and just wasn't into it at all. I think I had read too many similar books around that time, so I put it down and I have never come back to it.
I have a couple of books also that fall into that category. One of them is Peter Kreeft's Everything You Ever Wanted to Know About Heaven. I've heard for a long time that this is so good. I've tried to read it a couple of times and I just never get very far. I'm not sure why, but I might come back to it, so I'm holding on to it for now. Another book like that from this year, St. Benedict and St. Therese, The Little Rule and the Little Way, sounds so good and I like the author, but when I tried to read it recently, it just didn't speak to me, so I put it down. I might revisit it.
So another reason is that the book is one we didn't like and not what we expected. For example, a bestseller that everyone loves but you didn't like.
One that comes to mind right away is a book called Educated, a memoir about a girl who was self-educated. She went on to be wildly successful, which is great. However, when I started reading it, I felt like some of it was pretty far-fetched and I started to wonder, like, is this all really even true? And because I just felt so uncomfortable, I put it down, and I don't think you even read it.
I've never read it. I don't think we own it anymore
No,
either.
we DNF'd it and it went out of the house.
The next reason is that we don't really like the tone of the book. So it's weird or grim, it's dark, or on the flip side, it's really silly, or there's a lot of girlfriendy, chicklet language in it, or it could just be kind of, annoying or irrelevant.
Or all of those put together.
Or combine a few together. And
right, okay, so one that comes to mind for me, and I know a lot of people love this book, so don't hate me, but it's Pilgrim at Tinker Creek by Annie Dillard. I just can't even. That book is such a weird combination of like drama, nature, violence, flowery language. I couldn't even get past the first chapter. It went straight to my DNF list.
And one I have for this category is The Guest List by Lucy Foley. I tried to read this book 2 times and never got very far either time because I found it to be just a very weird and dark vibe to it.
Another whole category is books that are just trash. They have bad morals, they're graphic, they have bad language. We will just DNF those right away, which is about 90% of the books out there. Or if they're a religious book and the theology isn't right, or if it's blatantly anti-Catholic, that goes to DNF.
So my book in this category would be The Forest Queen, which I read most of it and quite enjoyed it. And I think it's some sort of Robin Hood retelling, if I remember right. But it was getting way too familiar with the topics of abortion and contraception, pushing those a little too hard, so I never finished that book.
I trained her right. There you go. Good job, Kate. DNF it. Recently, I tried to read a book called The Einstein Effect. I saw it at the library. It's all about how Albert Einstein has influenced our culture in a lot of fun, interesting ways. Evidently, there's some guy out there and it's his job to be on the internet and answer people's questions about Albert Einstein. So it looked really good, but oh my goodness, this man, I don't know why, but he just devolved into potty humor, bathroom humor. It was not funny coming from a grown man. Felt like it was kind of disrespectful to Albert Einstein, so I only lasted like a chapter in that book.
And there was another book that we tried to read for school, Dear Bob and Sue, highly recommended, about the national parks, but also devolved really quickly into that bathroom humor and a lot of language as well.
Yeah, I was so disappointed with that because it sounded really good. A lot of people love it, but the authors aren't young. They have grandchildren. So it was almost embarrassing to read them writing about these topics. Like, why? Just no.
Just think they would know better at that age. So it was a shock and not a good one.
Yeah, it was not a good one.
So the next category is one that might be a little bit superficial, and that is when you DNF a book because the audiobook narrator isn't great.
I'm going to say it's not superficial because a bad narrator can truly ruin a good book.
But I guess the opposite is true. Like, a great narrator can pull you through a really tedious and sometimes boring book.
So I had one of these just a couple of weeks ago. I wanted to revisit the Pickwick Papers for Christmas. Charles Dickens, right? Such a fun book. But the narrator on Hoopla, he had a British accent. That's good. But he talked so fast that I just literally could not keep up with him. And so I DNF'd it. I'm going to revisit it later, maybe with a different narrator.
So next is that the book has some sort of physical problem. For example, one thing we run into with the old vintage Catholic books that we handle is sometimes they're just too musty and they really prey on our allergies. For example, the comfort dessert to my name day cookbook that we cooked with in this video, allergy trigger completely.
Oh my
we
goodness.
Cannot read it.
It's such a wonderful book. We wanted to read it, but no, that made me have to take Benadryl. So that was unfortunate. Another problem that I run into because I'm old and I wear glasses is the printing. For example, this book by Mike Aquilina, Signs and Mysteries, Revealing Ancient Christian Symbols. I want to read this book, but it is printed in light gray ink. And whenever I try to read it, it just gives me a headache. It's just physically hard for me to read this book. I have tried multiple times and I always wind up DNFing it just because it's annoying to me to struggle with that light gray print.
Another reason is that the book is the wrong genre. For example, a book that's way too scary and you won't sleep at night.
Who would that refer to? Okay, so yeah, I have a really hard time. I love to read spooky books, but for some reason, I just can't do vampires. So this fall, I tried to read The Bloody Habit by Eleanor Nicholson, but I just didn't even make it out of the first chapter. I just felt so tense the whole time. It's going to get spooky and creepy, and I just can't. So while I have read her other books and loved them, The Bloody Habit was just a DNF.
So next reason is that the book is too similar to something you read recently, like I sort of mentioned earlier, or perhaps it is a reiteration of a book that you already have read.
That happened to me in November. I was all on fire about this vintage book, The Month of the Holy Souls. It's a 30-day novena for the Holy Souls in Purgatory with all kinds of stories and quotes from the saints, and I'm reading it. So I got through the first few days and I thought, a lot of these stories sound really familiar. And then I investigated more only to discover that right up front it says, by kind permission, blah, 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 many of these stories are taken from another book called Purgatory by Father F.X. Shoup. I have read that book, Purgatory, so I just wound up DNFing this book because it literally was just a reiteration of Father Shoup's book.
And the last category is the TMI books, the too much information books. where the author doesn't really talk about the topic, but instead tells you their life story and all the associated stories.
So you think it's going to be about one subject, but then it's really like, here's my life story.
Here's my struggles.
Right.
Read them all. Have pity on me.
Well, so recently I DNF'd a book like that by Father John Ricardo. I heard him speak a couple of years ago and loved that. He's such a tremendous speaker. So I wanted to read one of his books, and the one I chose is called Rescued, and maybe I just didn't realize it was going to be mostly about his personal struggles, but I felt like it was just too much information for me, that it wasn't really spiritually beneficial to me hearing all these sad details, a lot of them. So I did wind up DNFing that book.
So that was a look at our DNF list. And we do want to say that we don't usually like making these videos and talking about the books that we didn't like, but we do hope that some of this information was helpful to you.
Right. We're not trying to belittle any author. We know that writers put their hearts and souls into their books, so that's great. And a lot of these books are fine. They just weren't right for us at the right time.
So now let us know down in the comments what type of books you tend to DNF, and if there's anything out there you think we should just avoid.
Yeah, we do love reading your tips, and we do take them to heart, so thank you.
So we hope you enjoyed today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.